So I'll introduce myself. I'm Janet Reynolds. I'm one of the volunteer coordinators for the Sonoma County Democratic Party. And Ron Taylor is our voter registration coordinator. And we thank you so much for coming today and working to ensure that you understand the part about tabling and voter registration. I'm going to do the tabling part, and then Ron will take over for the voter registration. And let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about tabling and include a voter registration, because that's always part of tabling. We have taken the noun table and made it a verb. I've actually asked people, is that really a word, tabling? Well, it is now. So I don't know if it's in the dictionary, but anyway, so some of the reasons why we're doing this training is to ensure that we have teams of volunteers who will help us win those elections for Democratic candidates. And that means we're out and about in the county at various locations, and usually have a table and at least 2 volunteers working to get the word out about voting in the election and registering people to vote. We want to register and encourage those people who are already registered to vote. We are in the midterm elections. I usually say this for the end, but I'm going to put it in here. In the June primary, Sonoma County had about a 45% turnout of registered voters. That's pretty good for midterms, but this is a crucial midterm, and we need to have a much higher turnout in the general election in November. In the 2020 presidential election, I don't know if you know this, but Sonoma County had the highest turnout of any county in California. We were just over 90% of registered voters that turned out to vote in 2020. And we'd like to see maybe not hit that number, but somewhere close to it. As a local Democratic Party county, so we were pretty pleased with ourselves in 2020, but we'd like general election. So we're here to register and encourage voters to vote. We want to understand what democratic values that we share, how you being a volunteer fits into our campaigns. We ask people to commit to using their energy and skills in our district and other districts to elect Democrats. I know many of you are probably texting and writing postcards outside of Sonoma County, even outside of California. We thank you for doing that. And we are looking at the possibility of getting a bus for any people that might like to go into Northern Nevada to campaign for the senator that we must re-elect in November from Nevada. So look for that possibly coming. And we want to have a mutual commitment of how much we value you as our volunteer, and that we do rely on you to help us do the work. So why do we table? We table because we like personal contact with voters or potential voters. And this may seem like a very small percentage, 1 to 60% doesn't sound like much, but talking to one person can make a difference. And you just never know how you may impact somebody and their interest in voting. An effective conversation, you might have a 10% impact on somebody who may go and vote in November. And I think that's really important. I always say, if I can affect one person, I'm a happy camper. As you all know, elections are won on margins. One of the contests we have coming up in November is for the Sonoma County Superintendent of Schools. That election was held in June. The top 2 candidates, neither one of them reached the 50% plus 1 vote threshold to actually win that election. So now we're having another election. They go on to November, and they will be on your ballot in November. The 2 top candidates were Amy Carter and Brad Coscarelli. So because neither one of them reached the 50% plus 1 threshold, they will be on our ballot in November. So margins make a difference. I was at the Santa Rosa Democratic Club meeting last night, and Carl Tenenbaum, who ran for sheriff, came very close to having a runoff with the gentleman that did win that race in June. And it was short, I think he said 434 votes. So 434 people could have made a difference in the election of sheriff. They're very close. Margins can make or break an election. Why I am a Democrat. Some people have a hard time saying why you are a Democrat. We do have this as a poster, and it just lists some of the things that we've accomplished in a little over 100 years, because it goes back to women's suffrage amendment. Two things on this that really stick out for me, I'm a senior, are Social Security and Medicare. Social Security and Medicare have to be reinstated every 10 years. It's a vote in Congress. Comes up in 5 years for this 10-year portion we're in. And you know, the Republicans, if they gain control of Congress and they have a Republican president in 2024, we may lose Social Security and Medicare. So it's a big deal. Some of these things that we have gotten past are a big deal. We certainly all know what happened with Roe v. Wade, and it matters. Voting matters. It matters a whole lot. So what are the basics of tabling? Well, we like to let people know that there is a Sonoma County Democratic Party. A lot of people don't realize how political parties are based. And in California, we have the California Democratic Party, and then every county has what's called a central committee. It's the same thing as saying Sonoma County Democratic Party or Sonoma County Central Committee. People are elected to the central committee through supervisory districts, and they get to be, sometimes they're appointed to the central committee if someone resigns or drops out. So Ron Taylor's on the central committee. I used to be, I'm not now. I have a disabled husband and just have to be aware of my time and energy and how I use it. So I can't do that anymore. But there is an active Sonoma County Democratic Party. I think most of you probably know we now have a headquarters at 448 Sebastopol Avenue in Santa Rosa. And we opened it in May. And we are going to keep this office open through November of 2024. So we have it for over 2 years. And we've made a commitment to have this office through the 2024 presidential election. We provide information on local races and issues. Our county party does endorsements for a lot of local races. They will be endorsing for city councils and school boards throughout Sonoma County in the upcoming election, and are taking applications right now. If you know anybody that's running, that's a Democrat and would like to go through the endorsement process, please tell them about it. We have several chartered Sonoma County Democratic clubs. Some of them are geographical. We have a great club down in the Petaluma area. Another one over in Sonoma, the Sonoma Valley one. We have one in Santa Rosa. We have now one in Roanoke Park. That's a fairly new club. We have one in Windsor that is in the process of regrouping, and looking at one in Cloverdale. And then we have a couple that are regional, the Sonoma County Latino Democrats and the Wine Country Young Democrats. To be a young Democrat, you have to be between the ages of 14 and 35. So I've aged out of that a long time ago. If you know of any young Dems, please tell them to get involved. And we do ask people to engage with the Sonoma County Democratic Party by filling out a volunteer card. That's how we have people that we're picking up new volunteers all the time. If they'd like to join a club, we have a wonderful card you can hand out that tells them how to get in touch with the clubs. We ask them to subscribe to the Sonoma County Democratic Party's e-newsletter. It comes out once a month. And then also to like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, we register voters and answer questions people have about that. And that we want to know people. We are in the community and we are active. So some of the basics of when and where we table, we are at the Sonoma County Fair. That's coming up in a week. A week from today is opening day, August the 4th. I can't believe it's August. It's like, I don't know where July went. Some of the days out at the fair are staffed by our clubs. I know opening day is staffed by the Democratic Club of Southern Sonoma County. So there will be people out there from the Petaluma, Cotati area. And then we have still have some open days to fill. So if you're interested and you haven't signed up yet, we'd be happy to have you contact us and let us know. We do some work at some of the farmers markets. We're hoping Cinco de Mayo maybe start in 2023. They have not done much. We are sometimes on the Santa Rosa Junior College campuses, both in Petaluma and Santa Rosa, and looking at getting onto Sonoma State and general public areas like libraries, grocery stores, and other locations. We also work at rallies and public gatherings, the Women's Rally, and a Sonoma County Pride that was held in June, which is always a fun event. So how do we prepare for tabling? Well, one of the things I'd like to remind you of is that we were engaging in direct voter contact. So the most compelling of arguments, you're a volunteer, and share why you are volunteering. What does it mean to you to step up and be a volunteer for the Sonoma County Democratic Party? We're not trying to tell people why they should be Democrats, but we tell people why we are Democrats. I'll share my story. It's very brief. I grew up in a Republican family. I'm from the East Coast, moved to California when I was 20, and that was 1965. And back then you had to be 21 to vote. So I turned 21 at the end of that year and registered to vote as a Republican, because that's kind of what I knew. And my parents, my family weren't terribly politically involved people, other than my mother always worked the polls. I remember visiting her at the fire station around the corner from our house on election day. After that, Ronald Reagan was elected Democrat, was the elected Republican as governor of California. And that is when I left the Republican Party and became a Democrat, because I did not like what I was hearing, what I was seeing. And I had grown enough and matured enough to realize this is not the party for me. So that's my story. I'd gladly share that with people. We also want to personalize the political. What does it mean to us? Why are we involved in politics? I'm a political junkie. Some days I overwatch MSNBC and CNN and other shows and listen to podcasts and that kind of thing and wonder, why am I doing this to myself? But it's just a part of who I am. So if you feel comfortable doing this, tell your story, tell your reason for tabling and why you're a Democrat. Again, you do not have to know all the issues, all the talking points. We are speaking to our fellow citizens and engaging them in democracy. That is the bottom line. So we're going to go into voter registration. I'm going to tell you another story about a tabling moment I had out at the county fair, probably in 2018, 2019. I was at the table and a young couple stopped by that were looking at some of our buttons. Sorry, I closed my patio door. Loud trucks are going up the road next to me. So they stopped at the table and they were looking at some of the buttons we have for sale at the table. And opening question, why are you registered to vote? That's your opening question. And the young man, I would guess they were in their mid to late 20s, said to me, oh yes, and I always vote. I'm a voter, I love to vote. I'm a strong believer in voting. It's very important to me. Oh, that's great. The young woman looked at me and she kind of got a puzzled look on her face like, I don't know if I'm registered to vote. I think I am, but I don't know. Well, at that point, the young man looked at her in a horrified manner and said, what do you mean you don't know if you're registered to vote or not? How can you be that way? And I just kind of put my hand up and said, well, let's check to see. And I opened up my phone to the Secretary of State's website for elections where you can check to see if you're registered to vote. So I handed her my phone. She put in all her personal information and it came out she was not registered to vote. So I just went step into my office, which was actually the table next to me, and had her registered to vote, gave her receipt, and they were on their way while the young man was a voter. He was very upset about that. So you just never know what's going to happen, how you react to it, how the people react to it, but they were very happy that they were able to register to vote.
I hope so.
Or
I
she
hope their
was having.
relationship was okay.
I'm sorry, Ron, you're breaking up.
Oh, I was just saying, I hope their relationship survived that.
I often wondered that. I have no idea if they're still together or not. When you arrive at the table, for instance, if you're at the fair, you should familiarize yourself with the buttons, bumper stickers, and t-shirts. We will have t-shirts for sale and baseball caps this time. And we have new buttons for sale. You can't see mine, but it says vote on it. And at the top, at the bottom, very lightly, is Ruth Ginsburg's dissent collar. And at the top, it says, "We are ruthless." Vote. So that's one of our new buttons. We also have a button with a QR code, those quick response codes that young people are very comfortable with. And we're asking all volunteers to wear that at the table because they can just hold their phone up to the QR code and it takes them directly to the voter registration page. Again, take a look at the voter registration form. Our form this year is bilingual, both English and Spanish. So the printing is very small. Be aware of that. And remember and ensure you understand the requirements for a person to register to vote, which Ron's going to go over in a minute. And then review any possible petitions we are asking people to sign. We have no petitions out for this election cycle. We will be having some information on a couple of the propositions that will be on the ballot. The biggest being, it's proposition number 1. It was signed by Governor Newsom and put on the ballot because it would be an amendment to our state constitution for reproductive justice and rights for women and ensuring the right to an abortion. So that we will have literature on the table for people if they want to know about that. That is a yes vote that we are heavily looking for. And I do like to add that if you think because this is such a blue state, it will be no problem passing that, I'll remind you that in 2008, we had Proposition 8 on our ballot, which up till that election in November of 2008, people in California had a legal right to marry. Gay people had a legal right to marry in California. I thought sure that that proposition would go down in defeat, but big money was poured into our state along with people, and we lost that proposition. We lost the right for LGBTQ people to marry in this state until the Supreme Court issued the ruling years later and allowed LGBTQ people the right to marry in our state. So it's a big, important proposition that we have to get the vote out for that. So that will be at the tables. So I'm going to turn this over to Ron and like him to take it over from here.
Okay, everybody can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Breaking up a little bit, Ron, so stay close.
Could you
Okay.
say that proposition number one more time?
Number 1.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the first thing about voter registration is that it is nonpartisan. It's very important that we are not out to register Democrats. We're out to register voters. And we'll get a little more into that as we get to the party section of the voter form, but that's where we start. It's a nonpartisan activity, even though when we're doing it, we happen to be working from a table that's labeled Sonoma County Democratic Party. That's fine, as long as we do it with a nonpartisan attitude in mind. So we begin with a question, as Janet was suggesting a minute ago. You simply ask a person coming by, are you registered to vote? Or something similar. Have you moved since you last voted? Anything that's kind of, a simple, non-challenging question that will get a response and enables them to answer without defensiveness. Perfectly okay to ask somebody walking by your table or your booth to ask them a question. We want to open a dialogue. Voter registration is one thing that we do when we're tabling. There are other reasons for tabling, as Janet was going over. And so you want the dialogue to begin no matter what. If they happen to say, yes, I'm registered, simply ask them if they plan to vote in 2022 and remind them of Election Day, November 8th. And then that dialogue can go into other things. They may want to know how they can get involved. You can talk to them about the clubs, about volunteer opportunities, whatever else they're interested in talking about. If they happen to say, no, I'm not registered, ask them if they would like to register right now, because we can help with that. Okay, next slide, Janet.
Come on. It's not moving.
Uh-oh. That happened to me once last time.
It's doing okay.
You may have to click inside the PowerPoint again. I don't know.
What's wrong here? Sorry.
Yeah, treat your screen as a Zoom screen. And then
There
you
we
can't-
go.
There you go. Okay. Or just hit the space bar, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
So who's eligible to vote in California? In other words, who can register? They have to be a United States citizen. They have to be a resident of California. They have to be 18 years of age or older on election day. They can be registered if they're 16 years old or 17 years old. They do what we call pre-registration. And what that does is it puts them in the voter rolls so they can vote in the cycle when they turn 18. But they don't have to do anything after pre-registering it. It's all kind of, they get in the system, basically. They have to be not found mentally incompetent by a court of law. Remember the court of law part, because you may end up getting questions about, a relative or somebody who's the person you're talking to that doesn't consider them mentally competent. But in order for them to not be able to vote, they have to be declared mentally incompetent by a court of law. That's a different thing than what most of us experience. They can be in county jail serving a misdemeanor sentence. They can be in county jail because jail time is a condition of probation, or they can be on parole, probation, or mandatory supervision, or on post-release community supervision. The only thing that really prevents a person who is of the right age and a citizen from voting is if they are in prison serving a prison term for a state or federal felony. That's really the only criterion that would prevent them. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we've got several slides where we're going to go through the sections of the voter registration form. The form itself is 17 inches long, 8 inches wide. It's a longish form. And as Janet was pointing out, it's pretty busy with words, mainly because it's got both English and Spanish in it. You can see if you look at the blue lettering there, this is an image of the form. You can see the Spanish right under the English on the form. So the first question is, I am a US citizen and a resident of California. You have to be able to check yes in order to register. If you can't do that, well, you might as well stop right there. But once you've checked that yes, then 18 years old or older. And if you're 16 or 17 and you want to pre-register, you check that box. So that's to do with the age of eligibility. Then the second box has to do with the name. This is the full legal name, first name, middle name, last name. And it's the form of the name that would match their identification, their California driver's license, their social security card, that sort of thing. And notice the red lettering on the screen. That is not on the form. That's part of a laminated guide that you will have available to you when you're tabling. We provide as a guideline for filling out the form. And it's simply got a reminder on there about what the box is about. Then box number 3 is identification. You may get the question, do I have to show my ID? The answer is no, but they do have to put their date of birth in there, MMDD, and a 9-digit year. And
Four-digit year.
I mean, 9-digit, 4-digit year. And they have to then put in either the California driver's license or California ID number, or the last 4 digits of their social security number. Either one will do, either the California ID or the social security number, but they only need the last 4 digits of the social. And if, I guess if they want to know why they're needing to provide this information, this is how the registrar matches them, their name, with a data profile they have access to. That way they can quickly verify, that they are a citizen and all that, and that they are eligible to vote. And then the last part of number 3 is U.S. state or foreign country of birth. There they need to put their state where they were born. There are people filling out this form, they put USA because they see US there and they just put it in because they're thinking about citizenship when they're hit this point in the form. But that's not the issue here. The issue is your data profile, and they need the state. So whether it's Iowa or Missouri, whatever it is. And if they're born in a foreign country, the country. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Now, this section is about addresses. The first part of it, number 4, is the address where you live, your residence or home address. Number 5 is the address where you receive mail. They're different, they're both important. The address where you reside, there are people who want to put down a PO box there. That's not allowed. They have to actually say where they reside. And the reason for that, there are probably many reasons, but the main one I know of is the registrar has to identify them as a voter for certain districts. In other words, if they live in a certain location on the map, they will vote for a certain school district board. They'll vote for a certain assembly district representative, and so on. So their home address is important. Then their mailing address can be a PO box. That's fine. Wherever they pick up mail, wherever they want to get their mail is what should be down there. It's also important for other reasons. It's where they're going to get, their sample ballot and things like that will be their mailing address. And then the question of the homeless comes up often. As you can see in the notes here, a homeless person living in a shelter, park, or safe parking place, it's okay for them to put as their residence the place where they hang out. Whether it's a shelter, it could be an intersection. It really doesn't matter. As specific as it can be, that's what they should put in there. And they really need to make an effort to be specific on that so that they, as a voter, can be identified with a voting profile for a district. And then their mailing address can be wherever they happen to pick up mail, whether it's with a relative or a friend, or a PO box if they have one, or a shelter. I don't think shelters receive mail for the homeless, but if that happens to be the case, that's fine. And it's also true that if they want to, they may not know this, but they can receive mail under
Ron,
general
you're breaking
delivery.
quite a bit.
Okay, am I better now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's go on to the next slide. This next part is about registration history. And this becomes important if someone is changing their name or has moved since they last voted. They need to change their address. They will need to put in their
You're breaking
previous
up again, Ron.
address. Oh boy, not good.
You're pretty
How about the rest of
breaking
you?
up.
No, I hear it fine.
I can
Can you
hear
hear
you
me?
fine.
Okay,
I
I'm
hear
not
fine
hearing-
too.
I can.
Okay,
Good to
good to
hear.
know.
Let's trudge on and do the
Ron,
best we can.
I know.
So on this section, really this has to do with history that the registrar needs to relate to your information if you are changing your name or changing your address, that sort of thing. If a person needs to re-register, they need to fill out this section. It doesn't necessarily have to be utterly specific, but it should be as specific as they can make it. A lot of people cannot remember the number of their street address the last time they registered to vote. But if they can remember the street and the city and the county, then that will help. The registrar can usually make that work. And then the section 7 is simply about getting onto the permanent vote by mail list with the state. This has existed for a number of years, and some people choose always to vote by mail. Right now, it's a little bit like a moot point because everybody's getting a vote by mail ballot anyway. But if somebody wants to vote by mail into the future, they probably ought to check the box yes on this one. Okay, next slide.
Come on, there we go.
Okay, we're into the section that's optional on the form. There are two parts to this top half here. Section 8 is about choosing a political party. Section 9 is a variety of optional information you can provide when you register. You know, the voter that you're helping to register, they're not required to fill out these sections, but there are reasons that they may well want to. And it's good for you to be aware of those so you can provide good answers, or if necessary, encourage them. We don't want to encourage them to register Democrat. That's not our job. And that can be seen as inappropriate activity. However, when they're choosing political party, some of them want to be independents. They're registering at our table, but they want to be an independent voter. And they look at the first box and it says American Independent Party, and they think they're going to check that box. And you probably ought to be prepared to tell them what the American Independent Party is, so they know that that's not the box they should check. If they really want to be an independent voter, they should check no party at the very bottom of this section. No party becomes a no party preference voter. If they don't check any box, then the registrar will make them automatically a no party preference voter. But the American Independent Party is a party that was founded in 1968 by George Wallace and his supporters. It's basically, I don't know what it is today, except that it's probably as rigidly conservative as it was then. It was a party of segregationists and John Birch Society members supporting George Wallace. And a lot of people get into it just by checking this box, not realizing what they're getting into. The other thing to know about choosing political party is the voter, you know, they don't have to check a box, but and they may want to remain independent, but if they ask you, why does it matter? Be prepared to tell them that if they are no party preference when the next election cycle comes, they will get a vote by mail ballot that does not include options for the presidential primary in 2024, for example. During the presidential primary, it's a partisan primary, and some parties actually will not allow you to vote unless you're registered in their party. The Democratic Party does allow you, but it's not automatic. If you go to the polls, if you go to the vote center, you have to actually request the Democratic ballot in order to vote in the presidential primary. If you're waiting at home and you get your vote by mail ballot and you happen to be no party preference, it won't give you an opportunity to vote for nominees for president within the Democratic Party. You can change that by, you know, calling or emailing or whatever, but you know, that's the situation. And so the person who's registering with you, they may want to know that, what the consequences are for registering as an independent at this stage. Now, on the right-hand side, the optional voter information box, the first part of it is email and phone number. And again, they may not want to provide this, but there are good reasons to provide it to the registrar. The email address and a phone number are used by the registrar in the event that there's a problem with getting them registered, or with their ballot once their ballot is filled out and turned in. If their signature is not recognizable, this is how the registrar will contact them to make sure they're the right person voting. If somebody else got their ballot instead or something like that, they're checking on that because the signature they haven't filed doesn't match the one that's on the ballot. And it's very efficient to use the phone or email to get that done. If it has to happen by mail, it's a longer process. And it has other options here. Receiving election information by text message, that keeps you up to date during the election season. Choosing a language for voter information is possible at this point. And you can specify another language, and then they will contact the voter and find out what they can do. And then it says, I want voting materials in an accessible format. I happen to know what happens with this because my brother's, I helped him register, and he has limited vision. And so they sent him a card after a couple of weeks when he had been registered and asked what sort of accommodations he needed. So I helped him with this too. Sent the card back specifying that he needed a large print ballot. It's that sort of thing that this triggers. And at the very end, someone was asking about this earlier. There's a box for, I want to be a poll worker. And then they'll contact you. They'll put you on a list. The very last part of the form for the voter is section 10, and it's called affidavit. It's a signature box, and it is an important affidavit in the sense that as a voter, you are affirming under penalty of perjury that the information you're providing is accurate and complete to the best of your knowledge. And then the date. And one thing to be aware of is that signature is absolutely necessary for the voter registration to be processed. So don't let them get away from you without signing. If they happen to not put the date in, put the date in for them at that point. But if they sign, probably they're going to notice the date too, and everything's fine. Let's go to the next section, Janet. This is the very tail end of the form, and there are two parts to it. You can see the dotted line where there's a perforation on the form. For our purposes, this is where we fill something out in response to the form. It says on the right-hand side, did someone help you fill out or deliver this form? Well, if they're filling it out with us, we will end up delivering it for them. No matter how much assistance we gave at the booth, we're going to deliver it for them to the registrar. So what we ask you to do is simply sign whatever form of signature of yours you want to give, and then put SCDP in caps under either the name and address line or the org name and the phone number of the party, which is 707-575-3029. Another reason it's good to have this laminated guide with you is that the phone number's on it in red like that. So you can remember it when you're helping. And you do this, you put your signature and SCDP and the phone number in both the top box and the bottom box. And then you tear it at the perforation and hand that bottom part to the voter as a receipt. You'll see it has a serial number on it, 998001. That's the same number as in the top of the form. And you can show them that. It's a unique number. And there it is on this slide, 998001. So that's a unique serial number to that voter registration form. And one other thing we ask you to do is we ask you to keep track of voter registration forms while you're at the booth or at the table. We will give you a certain number of them. Every one of them is unique. And we have a logging sheet where we ask you to write down the number of the serial number so we can keep track of which ones have gone where what happened to them. Even do this for voter forms that we hand out to voters. It is okay to hand the voter the blank form, If they want to take it home and fill it out at home, that's fine. But please write down the serial number on the log so we know what happened to it. And you can simply say the voter took it with them. Let's see. Oh, yes, I guess the other thing about this is the receipt. If you can tell them that in 2 to 3 weeks, they should get a postcard from the registrar telling them that they are now registered to vote in Sonoma County. If they don't happen to get that postcard, there's a number on the receipt to call, and they should go ahead and call it. And if they've got the receipt with them, they can refer to the serial number, and that may help the registrar track down what's going on, what happened with their form.
Don't ever put your personal address or phone number on this. We have signed out probably 500 voter registration forms with the Sonoma County Democratic, with the Registrar of Voters of Sonoma County. So they know every time one of our forms come back, it belongs to the Sonoma County Democratic Party. So SCDP is simply Sonoma County Democratic Party. And the Registrar of Voters will know this is one of our forms. So don't put your personal information, just your signature. And I sign with just my first initial and last name. I don't put my full name down there either. So.
Okay. Well, let's go on to the next slide. We have a few slides emphasizing certain things. This slide is about selecting a political party or not. Most people understand that doing this is their personal choice. And they may say, I do not want to choose a political party. If they do, they should check that box that we were looking at, no party or none. And be aware of the following. The American Independent Party is an actual party. This does not count as being an independent voter. And selecting no party may mean that the person cannot vote in California's presidential primary. It all depends which party they check. Which party they're interested in voting in when they vote, when they check the box, no party preference. If they wish to ensure they vote in the California presidential party, they should choose a party.
Yeah.
And they can re-register to do that too. That's another option for them. Let's see.
If I could just add that we are legally required to register anyone to vote. We're not there to just register Democrats. And for those of you that may be working at the fair booth, I always feel like the Republicans send somebody over to our booth at least once during the fair and register as a Republican just to see if we'll do it. We are legally required to do that. And we are legally required to hand them a form if they wish to take it with them and don't want to fill it out there. That's legal. You can never that's denying someone the right to vote. You cannot deny anybody the form.
Yeah, you really don't want to stand in their way at all.
No.
Any resistance or even hesitation, I think, would be bad.
Yeah.
You want to be as encouraging and helpful as you can. Okay, next slide. Addresses. We went over this, but it's good to reinforce it. In the section for home address, there's a line that says, if you do not have a street address, and on this line, they may state where they hang out, whether it's a park, homeless shelter, or a street corner, whatever it happens to be. And then the mailing address, they need to have a mailing address. If it's really hard to vote without one. It can be done, but it's hard. The post office box, a church or shelter, a friend that allows them to receive mail, or general delivery, as I was mentioning earlier. And a lot of people don't know that. It can be handy if they're in transition or something like that. Okay, next. Review the form. It's very important that we ensure that the voter registration form is complete. That's what I do, and I encourage you to do, is the laminated form that we've been looking at with red pointers on it. I hold that next to the form, after somebody has given me a completed form, and I go down their form, looking at all the boxes to make sure that the highlighted ones have been dealt with. Most commonly missed sections, not checking the box for US citizen or for 18 or over or 16 or 17. Obviously, it's a problem, but people skip them sometimes, and you don't want to let that happen. Their date of birth, that needs to be on there. US state or country of birth. And as it notes here, sometimes people write USA thinking they're dealing with citizenship. It's not about that. It's about where they're born. And then the California driver's license or ID number or the last 4 digits of the social security number, sometimes omitted. And marking political party is often omitted. And just so they know, if they don't fill that box, they will become a no party preference voter. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some people just fail to sign after doing all that work, and that's not good. And then the date of signature, and feel free to write that in if they've left you, walked away, and not done it. Okay, next slide.
Just to reiterate before we move on, sometimes we have teenagers that come by the booth by themselves. And when they learn, particularly those that are 16 and 17, that they can pre-register to vote, or they're just 18 and they want to register to vote, some of them don't have a driver's license yet or a California ID card. They'll ask if they can use their school ID card. No, must be either a driver's license or California ID card. However, they all have social security numbers. 99% of the time, they don't have a clue what their social security number is. So I've actually had them stand there and call their parent and ask for their social security number. And as a parent of a minor or young person, the parent sometimes gets very upset, like, who is asking you for your social security number? And I've had to get on the phone a few times saying, well, who I am, why I'm asking, but I don't want the whole number. It's just the last 4 digits, and that your child is registering or pre-registering to vote. And sometimes they'll go ahead and do it. Sometimes, no, not giving it. No, I don't want him doing that or her doing that. So be aware that if a young person is by themselves, they don't have that information, they call mom or dad, that may happen. So.
And I would suggest if they get a no, you don't have the number, and the parent is opposing doing this, you could suggest that the young person take the form home with them.
Yes.
And get it filled out at home together with their parent, and that's just fine.
Yep.
Then you write down that serial number and record it on our log and say they took the form with them.
Yep.
The other option is after they've filled out the first part of the form and they can't get the number, and they're not going to do it and they don't want to take it home, then you've got to void the form. Just do that, write void across it and put it in our safe space. I'm going to go over that in just a second, where we put the form. But Janet, if you want to go back a couple slides, back to the address one, I forgot something. This is about homelessness, the focus on this slide, but it reminded me, we often get college students showing up at our table or our booth, and they have a choice in terms of which address they're going to use. If they happen to be living away from home, as you all probably know, they will have registered for college using their home address as their permanent address. You know, if they live in San Diego with their parents through high school, and then they're going to Sonoma State, well, their permanent address is probably going to be in San Diego. Whereas they may want to vote in Sonoma County, and they can. They simply have to register accordingly. If they want to vote in Sonoma County has to be their home address for purposes of voting. And they can put down their parents' address as their mailing address, if that works for them. But anyway, that is an option that they have, as long as they're otherwise eligible. Okay, let's go forward a couple slides. Yes, This is a reminder on what's optional on the form. Mailing address, if the person has a PO box, receives mail elsewhere, they can put that in or not. It's optional in the sense that if your home address is the same as your mailing address, then you don't have to fill in the mailing address. And it says so on the form. Email is optional, phone number is optional. Checking the vote by mail, permanent vote by mail box is optional. And then if the person has moved, changed their name, or was previously registered to vote, they do need to complete the registration history section. It's otherwise optional. The registration history is important if they're making those changes. Okay, next slide. Yes, the registration receipt. We talked about, the perforated form at the bottom. You tear off and give them as a receipt with writing on it SCDP 707-575-3029. You tell them that that's their receipt, show them the number on it matches the number on the completed form, and that they will receive a postcard at their mailing address in 2 to 3 weeks. And if they do not, they should call the registrar to check on their status. And you thank them for registering to vote, and remember to vote on November 8th. And I think, let's go to the next slide. I think it's got the other thing I'm thinking about. Yes, here we go. Completed voter registration form. Put it, please, in the assigned location as directed by the event organizer or shift leader. Most of the time, this will be a box of some kind under the table so that it's out of sight and secure. We want to keep track of those forms. Completed forms need to be turned in 72 hours. I have one I have to turn in this afternoon from yesterday's Wednesday night. It says here the county fair booth will always have a specific location. Wednesday night market or other offsite tabling, there will be a place. And you can have the completed form upside down on a clipboard. The key thing is keep it secure and keep the information not visible to passersby. It's sensitive information and we don't want it out visible in a public place. We owe that to the voter. Okay, next slide. And oh yes, you probably know about this at this point, but just to make sure, back in 2016, a law was passed in California that enabled counties to conduct voting differently with greater flexibility and convenience for voters. And now this has become, well, permanent, really, I hope. Every voter gets a mail-in ballot at this point. The pandemic kind of accelerated the process in a sense. It expanded in-person early voting and allowed voters to cast a ballot at any vote center within their county. You'll recall, it used to be the case you had to vote at your polling location to get the correct ballot. Well, that's no longer the case. You can get the correct ballot at any vote center and vote it right there. And then the county provides secure ballot drop-off locations. I believe there are 20 of them in the county. All of that information, vote centers and drop-off box locations, will be published in the voter information guide that comes out a few weeks before the election. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Frequently asked questions. How old can you be to register to vote? 18 years old or older on election day. And 16 or 17-year-olds can pre-register. Deadline. Yes, the deadline to register to vote is 15 days before an election, which this year is October 24th. We've got that listed on the next slide, I think. Your form can be dropped off at the registrars that day by 5 p.m. or it can be mailed at that point. You may wonder, why is there any kind of deadline for voter registration when it's now the case that you can register to vote all the way up to and including of election day. And basically the answer is if you get registered 15 days before the election or previous to that, the way your balloting and your information will be handled will be the same as everybody else. You'll get a mail-in ballot on time, you'll get all the packets on time, and so on. What if I moved and I'm registered at my old address? Re-register. However, if you moved within 14 days of the election, you can vote at your old address legally. And that provides an option for a small number of people that this would apply to. What if I want to change my name on my registration? Re-register. Fill out the whole form, and you remember the registration history section of the form. Okay, next slide. Where is the Registrar of Voters located in Sonoma County? On Fiscal Drive in the county complex. Just for fun, I've been encouraging people, if you've never done it before, during the election day, going by there is a treat. It's a very, very active place. I wouldn't get in their way, but people are coming and going all day. In fact, these days it's been the case, I think, for several days leading up to the election because of early voting. Yeah. People just coming and going, registering, voting, all kinds of things. Do I need to present identification when I register? No. And the same for voting. You don't need to present an ID when you vote either. But to register, you do need that driver's license number or the last four of your social. And it points out in this little blurb here, if those numbers are blank on the form, you may need to present your ID at the polling place when you register or when you vote for the first time in a federal election. It is the case sometimes first-time voters have to present an ID at the polling place. Just has to do with their data profile and whether it's complete or not. Okay, next slide. Yes, the dates. On October 10th, vote by mail opens. October 11th, drop box is open. And October 24th, that's the 15 days before November 8th, is the last day to register to vote for this election, which, as you see here, it's called standard registration. And October 25th is when conditional registration starts. So any registration after that point is called conditional. Just puts you in a certain category with the registrar. And whether you get a mailed ballot or not depends on the registrar's timeline at that point. And October 29th, the 11-day vote center is open. There's a certain number of those. And then on November 5th, 4-day vote centers open. Both 11-day and 4-day vote centers are open every weekday, 9 to 5 during those days. And on November 8th, which is election day, all vote centers are open 7 to 8, including the registrar's office. And the official ballot drop boxes do close at 8 p.m. They're locked at that point and the ballots retrieved. Conditional voter registration closes at 8 p.m. also. So a person can go to a vote center and register during election day, but they need to do that by 8 p.m.
They have to be in line by 8 p.m. if there is a line. They still allow people to vote if they're in line by 8 p.m.
Yeah, I would, if somebody needs to register though, I would encourage, get there as soon as you can.
Don't wait till 5 minutes to 8 p.m. on election day.
Yeah, because what happens when somebody registers on election day, wherever they're registering, they will get a condition of what's called a provisional ballot because their registration hasn't been processed yet.
Right.
They're not yet on the rolls. So they get a provisional ballot, then that ballot is checked against their registration later and counted. Then December 8th is the deadline for the registrar to certify the election results from Sonoma County to the state, to the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah.
And,
Helene, did I have your hand up? You're muted.
we've got a couple chat comments too.
Okay. You're okay? Okay, she's okay. All right. Go on to the next slide. What questions do you have?